Hello, Year 10. Um, we in the English department really miss you, so I thought I would record this little message on our behalf straight for you. So it's a special message for Year 10. There we are. That's the English department. I'm sure you could recognize us from the picture. That's Mr. Harding, because he was left off the picture accidentally. Um, so from us, just a few reminders for you in this period of uncertainty about your English. Not only are we CUPS experts, we also are known to know a thing or two about how to pass and how to smash your English exams. That's me, in case you didn't recognize me for some strange reason. Okay, so just a quick reminder about what exams you have and what you get from those exams. You get two GCSEs for the price of one from us, which is very exciting. You get your English language GCSE, and you get an English literature in GCSE. So two full courses for your 4 hours a week in class with us. Now to get both of them have two exams each. And English language has an extra spoken language component, which I'll come to at the end. So you have English language paper 1, which is an hour and 45 minutes long, and you have that's about 19th century literature, sorry, and you have to do some imaginative writing for that. And then you have the slightly longer language paper 2, which is 2 hours and 5 minutes. And for that you read and compare a 20th century and a 21st century nonfiction pieces of writing. And you do some transactional writing, which is writing to persuade, to argue, to convince. Okay. For your English literature, you have your English literature paper 1, which is on Macbeth and an Inspector Calls. And then literature paper 2, which again is the longer paper, that's 2 hours and 15 minutes, which you'll find goes by in the blink of an eye, actually. And that's on A Christmas Carol, conflict poetry, and unseen poetry. So there's 3 parts to that exam, and you get an extra half hour for that third part. Okay? This may be how you feel or how you did feel in year 10 as you look forward to your exams. Yesterday would have been the day that year 11 wrote their first English exam. So I'm thinking of you especially now because in a year from this week, you will be them. And it can be daunting thinking about almost 8 hours of written exams in English. However, we are more than prepared to help you. And by the end, before you actually sit those exams, this is how you will feel. Oh, yes. There's us again. Okay, so that's Mrs. Doughty, Mrs. Callanan, Miss Henderson, Miss Augustus, Miss Welton, all of us right there. Yep, Miss Specs. Okay, Miss White, I mean. We're here for you. So I wanted to tell you that, to remind you of that, because it's easy to get caught up in the swing of things right now and sort of let things go to the wayside, and you might be feeling like you've gotten a little bit behind. So that's basically why I've made this little video for you, to remind you of the things that you should have finished and how we can help you if you've gotten a little bit behind. So what should you have covered by now since the lockdown began? Well, before even the lockdown began, you've read and revised an Inspector Calls. You've read and revised A Christmas Carol and Macbeth. So those are the 3 texts that you have studied once. Now, you can't just do it once, like you could in the old days, and do your coursework and hand it in and be over with it. What we want you to do is make sure that you're going back over these texts on some of the resources I'm going to tell you about later on in this video. But you have to do that. You have to have the discipline to be able to go back and revise these things, little and often, little and often, little and often. And of course, when you come back, we will do our best to get you to remember the things that you need to know for those texts, okay? Now the poetry, some of you had been looking at poetry throughout the year, little and often. So the poetry is what we started with during the lockdown, and that's because there are some very thorough, very good YouTube revision videos that tell you everything and more that you need to know for each of these. So we had set the task that all of the poems in your anthology should be annotated, and we also had attached to that a paper copy of the anthology, so that if you didn't have it on you, the actual book, you can do it on the paper for each page, and then you can, or electronically even, and then you can paste what you've written over or glue into your actual anthology, so you have all of the poems there. Now we're working behind the scenes making some more revision video for you. And I know that Miss Augustus has made a comparison video for her class, which may have been shared. So there's plenty of opportunities there. You have to make sure that you do it. And again, you can't just do it and then forget about it. It's something that you have to go back over and over and over again. Okay? So I'll come back to that in a minute. And then also the spoken language should have been prepared and ready for presentation this week, I believe, earlier this week. So for that, as you know, you need to have a 10-minute presentation, including a discussion. So you don't speak for 10 minutes. You answer some questions, which brings your 3 to 4 minute speech up to 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in more detail. But for now, this is where you should be at. So by the end of year 10, you have studied the 4 major texts for your literature exams: The Inspector Calls, A Christmas Carol, Macbeth, and Poetry. And you should have prepared and be ready to present your spoken language presentation. So a word about spoken language. That's you, confident, prepared, ready to give your presentation when we come back. Or potentially even before then, which we're exploring right now for you. So it's an essential part of the English language course. You cannot pass your English language GCSE without taking part in it. There's 4 grades, there's a 4-part grading system for it. You can have a distinction, a merit, a pass, or ungraded. And we have very, very few ungraded spoken language presentations, or have had in the past. Some people tend to panic a little bit about it, but really it's easier than it may seem. It may seem daunting to get up in front of your peers, like this person here at the podium, to do a presentation for that long. However, when you come back to school, generally we can assess you in small groups. So you'll give your presentation with only notes, okay, no PowerPoint or anything else. You have some bullet point notes and you talk through them, similar to what I'm doing now with you through this although I have a PowerPoint. So you talk through your speech, and more information has come through to you on Show My Homework about that. So you should know what the speech has to entail. You're at home now, so you can be researching it and you can be practicing it. I'm sure your parents would love to hear it, would love to hear it some more, and would love to hear it again. So you become very, very confident with expressing the information that you want to tell us about. Okay? And also, whatever research you've done for your speech is supposed to last between 3 and 4 minutes, but you have to answer questions for another 6 minutes. So you have to really know more about your topic than you actually have space in those 3 or 4 minutes to talk about. Okay? So you want to make sure that you're fully prepared for that. This is the perfect opportunity to do it. And when you get your GCSE certificate, it will state on it whether you've been given a distinction, a merit, a pass, or ungraded. So as I said, there's some uncertainty now. We're not sure when you'll be coming in. We are researching different ways of seeing if we can have you do some of these presentations for your teachers before you even come back. So we'll be in touch about that. But for now, you should be ready to present that. You should have all of your information, a cue card or a couple of point form notes ready to present. We're just waiting for the next steps. Now 40 of you, a selection from each of the grade systems, need to be recorded to send to Edexcel. Nobody sees this recording except us and the examiner, and it's the way that they check that we are being fair when we allocate that grade to you. So when you present in your small group to your peers and your teacher, your teacher's going to give you a grade, and then 40 of you from across the 197 of you will be chosen to be recorded. We need just over 10 in the distinction, just over 10 in merit, pass, and so forth. Okay? So that's nothing to worry about either. You just keep your notes. All your teachers will tell you to keep your notes when you're done your presentation, and then you may be one of those that's chosen to be recorded. It's not optional. We do have to record the students to send. Okay? So the spoken language, really, you don't want to be worried about that in year 11. You want to make sure that you're prepared and that you are ready to present. We're really looking forward to it. It's one of our favorite parts. I'm sure your teachers will tell you it's one of our favorite parts to do, because we learn a lot about you, about what you're interested in, and being able to talk to people, being able to make eye contact, being able to answer questions articulately and clearly is just a very underestimated skill. You have to be able to do that. It's very important, okay, that we enable you with those opportunities. Okay, so a word of advice. That's me, available for advice. Don't let yourself get behind, okay? Let us know if you need help organizing your time or you're unsure of what to do or how to proceed, particularly if you haven't really been on top of things up to this point. You really want to make sure that you don't let yourself get behind, because what that will do is add to any anxiety once we get back into school, and once you have your exam timetable in your hand, the last thing you need is to be further behind. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help you try to make sure that you organize your time between Mr. Brown and us in the English team. We want to make sure that you're enabled to get the best grade you can. So don't let yourself get further behind if you are already behind, and if you're not, well done you. Okay. So for poetry, you should have your annotations all complete. Now, Mary Meredith is on YouTube. She does all of the Edexcel specific conflict poetry. The reason we suggest her is because we know it's Edexcel, we know it's the right poems. You may have come across other tuition on YouTube that does poetry sessions, but you have to make sure they're the right poems. So have your anthology there ready to go. Make sure your annotations are clear. So you don't want one that just says, oh, this poem is using a metaphor, this poet's using a metaphor. You have to say what the meaning is behind it. The more times you write that out, the more likely you are to remember. But you can't just do your annotations and leave it at that. Okay, so you might say to me, oh, but miss, I've done it and I've done my annotations. Well, that's great. Absolutely, that's step one. Now you really need to make sure that you make revision cards and that you test yourself. So you can do this on ready-made revision cards, or you can make them out of lined paper, colored paper, sugar paper, electronically, on PowerPoints, any way you want. You want to make sure that you do revision cards though. And then once you make those revision cards, you want to test yourself. And you want to go back and see how well you actually know these things and try it. My son's come for a visit. Test yourself to see how well you actually know these poems. Thank you, Nico. That's great. So on those revision cards, you need to say, who wrote it? Who wrote Belfast Confetti? Who wrote Katrin? Who wrote The Destruction of the Sennacherib? What is it about? What's the key event that happens in The Man He Killed? Why? And this is very important, possibly the most important part of your poetry study. What is the author's key message? What is he or she trying to say to you? And where and when. So it could be that the poet has come from somewhere else and now resides in England, and so is writing kind of British colonial poetry, like John Agard. Okay, so and when is it a contemporary poem? Was it written in 1789 or was it written in 1989? That's a huge difference in time periods, which would have been influential to the poet's meaning. And you want to make sure that your revision cards have at least one key image or structural point about each poem. So really, for 15 poems, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 smaller revision cards that you can test yourself about these poetry, the poetry that you need to know. These are things that you would have been doing in 10 and 11 anyway. This is not special because of lockdown. These are things that we would have been getting you to do or will be getting you to do in September. So being able to sit in front of your computer or in front of a revision book or your anthology and having the time to sit and do this is a perfect opportunity for you to capitalize on and make sure you're extra prepared for that exam, which will be this time next year. Okay, now some of you have also started language paper 1. And some of you have been taking us up on taking part in the creative writing for Flights of Fancy that we've been offering. Now, there's another opportunity for Flights of Fancy that's going to be coming out after half term called Through the Keyhole. And we would like to see as many of you as possible take part in this. Creative writing makes up 50%, if you include transactional, it's 50% of your GCSE. Okay, so the faster that you get at that. And like I always say to students, the way that you get better at creative writing is to write. If you want to do 100 push-ups, you have to practice. If you want to swim 100 laps, you have to practice. If you want to be a better writer, you have to practice. You have to write and then write some more and then write some more. So that's a perfect opportunity for you to do that. Okay, so I've put the little icon of digital theater in the corner because you'll receive a reminder shortly that you have a free subscription to this provided by the school, and digital theater has excellent resources for both an Inspector Calls and Macbeth. Okay, you also have free access to GCSE Pod, which is great because they're really small, bite-size, digestible chunks of information that you should be learning, writing down, and then testing yourself about. Okay, so you don't just write it down once, you don't just listen once, you listen once all the way through, and then you start and listen again and write a revision card on the second pod. Okay, and it's very easy to find your way through. Now's the perfect opportunity to find the English resources on GCSE Pod. You also have Mr. Bruff, that's him, on YouTube, and his videos are decent. You just have to make sure that you're looking at generic content for the text and not AQA specific texts. Okay, and Click Revision on YouTube is very good. Oh dear, I'll come in a minute. YouTube Click Revision for an Inspector Calls. If you just go to YouTube and you type in Click Revision and Inspector Calls. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh dear. Okay. So Click Revision for an Inspector Calls is really, really good. Oh dear. Sorry, this is my son. He's having a very emotional moment. He's 3. Yes, it's very emotional, I know. Okay, so year 10, sorry about that. If you go to Click Revision on YouTube, Inspector Calls, they're about 15 minutes long. They're a lot longer than GCSE Pod, but they are thorough and they are brilliant. Everything you could possibly want to know. And then finally, there's Mary herself, Mary Meredith from YouTube for the poetry, okay? And at the end of the day, if you still feel like you can squeeze in some more revision before we come back, the daily BBC bite-sized lessons are fantastic. So I just made a little screenshot of today, which is the 14th of May, and you'll see there's a really big maths one on the left. I don't know why they made it bigger than English. That's a bit misleading, isn't it? And then English is in the middle, and today it's Shakespeare in focus. They don't seem to be unitized, so today it'll be Shakespeare, tomorrow it'll be something else. Oh, okay. But they're all actually really good. They're all well done. So, and you can go back on them and see. So for us, you should have done your spoken language, you should have done your poetry annotations, and you should be working on language paper 1. But at the end of all those 3 quite massive tasks, if you still have more time, then please go on to the BBC Bite-Sized Daily Lessons and have a look and see what they're offering. Okay, and if you do the work from that, obviously send it in and we'll have a look. Okay, so that's the end of our little reminder. A final word, there's us again. Yep, that's the English department. Looks just like us. There's Mr. Harding, got to include him. We miss you terribly, and we can't wait to see you again, really. So keep in touch and let us know if there's some way that we can help you. Okay? And we hope to see you all very, very soon.